The 6th Annual Assembly of Planners Symposium, combined with the Pacific Risk Management Ohana, or PRIMO, was held on August 18th and 19th, 2021 at the Dusatani Guam Resort and was brought to you by the Bureau of Statistics and Plan's Guam Coastal Management Program with a grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This two-day symposium was a hybrid conference, hosting live, in-person, and virtual attendance via Zoom. The theme of the symposium was Perseverance, Building Resilience, and Navigating the Way Forward. Up next, Session 2, Designing for Smart Growth. Facilitated by Renato Martinez of the American Institute of Architects.
To kick it off for Designing for Smart Growth, I would like to introduce to you Renato Martinez. Renato has been a member of the AIA since 1991 and is a two-term past president of AIA Marianas, where he currently serves as a member of the executive board. He currently works for the Guam office of HDR, an Omaha, Nebraska-based architectural and engineering firm with a diverse design portfolio, but he is primarily known as a leader in healthcare design and planning. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Renato Martinez.
Good morning. Title of the session is Designing for Smart Growth. Next slide. Presentation is registered for professional continuing education by AIA Marianas, and completion of the program will earn you one learning unit on health, safety, and welfare. Next slide. At the end of the presentation, we request that you complete a short survey by going to the AIA site via a QR code that will be shown on the screen to bring you to the survey page. Next slide, please. Next. So again, my name is Renato Martinez, also known as Tato. I'm a member of the AIA Marianas, an advocate for continuing education and professional growth. I will be your facilitator for this course. Next slide, please. So the term Smart growth refers to the initiative of the federal government led by the EPA and with support of various groups, including professional organizations, preservationists, developers, and local and state government entities, to underscore the value of planning communities with 10 specific goals. These goals address pressing challenges that include land use, transportation, housing opportunities, fairness, cost effectiveness, and healthy, livable, and attractive communities. Next slide. Next slide, please. The main message is that these communities do not just happen, they are carefully planned and designed. Architects lead the charge and have a responsibility to prioritize these principles and align all the needs and goals of the stakeholders. Next slide, please. Similar to the goals of smart growth, the AIA policy platform of 2020 identified 3 meaningful policies that address the current issues of healthy communities, climate action, and the future of the economy. These policies are further elaborated to include specific concerns such as equitable access to growth and opportunities, strategic investments in the community, and urgent steps to stop climate change. Next slide, please. It is where both smart growth principles and AIA policies overlap that we focus on this session's topics, and they are smart energy use, resilience and green building and infrastructure design, community-centric development and importance of collaboration, and developing a sense of place that provides equity, access, and variety in our communities. So I'd like to present our first panelist this morning. He's our very own AIA past president and past chairman of the Guam Building Code Council to talk about the first topic, one that is very close to his heart, at least for the past 10 years, and that is the Guam Energy Code. Please welcome Brent Vesey.
Thank you, Tato. So Guam Building Energy Codes, near and dear to my heart. I know it's really exciting material for all the rest of you. The Guam Tropical Energy Code finally this year was enacted into law. Thank you to the governor, her staff, and Senator Perez and the legislature. We've been pushing for this for a long time. It's now law, but it won't become effective for another 2 years. That'll be January 23. Until then, we have work to do. So when it becomes implemented, we're ready to go. DPW is ready to go, and the engineering and architectural community is ready to go, and we can make it very streamlined and effective. Part of that is working with International Code Council to create a certification for Guam. This is kind of a test program. This is something they can do, we can do, it's just never done. And what we'll do is we'll create this certification program so that DPW plan examiners and field inspectors can be certified for the Guam Energy Code. They're educated, they know what to look for, and when the plans come through, when the buildings are done, they know what to look for in the field and on the drawings. And so by doing this, then we can expand this program, and we're working with DPW to expand the program so we get their plan reviewers and inspectors to be certified for the rest of the code, the building code, the fire code, plumbing codes, and all that. So this would be huge for Guam because right now there's a reliance on professionals to make sure everything's done right, the contractors, and that they're going to do it right. And a lot of times there's, it's Guam, you cut a little corner here, it's close enough, and suddenly then it's not right, and then we're going to have problems. So this is a great opportunity for us to up our game and become much more professional in the process of applying the codes in buildings. We had worked with GCC previously to create a curriculum for the energy code, and energy compliance and sustainability. And so we'll work with them again to update their curriculum, and then so they can have a class so people can get trained and done locally. And then the ICC now, because of pandemic, COVID, they're allowing certification testing at home, which is new for them because before you had to go to the training center or you have to be in the States to be certified. And so now we can do it here in Guam. So this saves a whole bunch of headaches and cost. So this is what we'll be working for to make that work. In the meantime, and so we're excited to have this under our belt. It's here, it's ready, and now we're just moving along to make it happen. But then, next slide. We're looking forward to the 2021 Guam Building Code, and that's moving Guam from the 2009 ICC codes to 2021 ICC codes. In terms of today's subject, they also gives us an opportunity to introduce some things that haven't been done here or implemented here. Allows us to introduce rainwater conservation or harvesting standards. So kind of a gray water system for irrigation, toilets, that kind of stuff. There is code stuff for it now, but it's onerous, it's expensive, and it's difficult to implement. And so we're looking to they're creating the new standard and working with them and make it work for Guam so that we can do it easier and still create a healthy situation. Water conservation standards. This is now common in the newer codes. And so I know you all love the low flush toilets, the showers and shower heads and faucets. But in the end, with the newer technology, products are performing much better than they had in the past. And we keep reducing the amount of water we use. That means we reduce the reliance on the water lens. And so we can increase the capacity of our communities without increasing the demand for water. So this is a long-range, long-term investment into making sure that we still have water 40 and 50 years down the road. And then with the newer codes, it also allows us to update the GTEC, the Guam Tropical Energy Code. So the idea is we want it under the belt, we want it implemented so we can get all this other stuff in line. But we didn't want to use the newer codes because the codes are like this. The building code is integral with the fire code, and the fire code and the plumbing code and the fire protection code. And so the energy conservation code, it's all tied together. So if we tried to make the current Guam tropical energy code comply to the newer codes, it would not be effective in terms of all the other codes that it has to apply to. It's hard to cherry pick new codes and just make it work. So the idea is, while we're getting everything in line, we can update the GTEC to the newer core standards. And so that's your lighting, your mechanical equipment, and all that. So we can update those standards and the performance values that goes with it. And then we can also introduce these other things. So it's an exciting time in the Building Code Council. If you're interested, next slide. Oh, that's it. On the bottom, interested, contact me. We'd love to have you. We're going to have workshops throughout the year and into next year. And this is what we're going to do, is take these codes, review the new codes, see what changed, see if we are happy with the change, we want to modify it, and then we create a Guam building code that we can implement, hopefully about a year from now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple of questions. Can we, if we have any questions from the audience? Yes, not. Well, quick question though. Zero code. Are you going to talk about? Will you be able to talk about zero code, or is that Well, anyway, if just question on implementation. How do you think zero code can be implemented realistically on Guam? Is that possible?
Zero code in terms of?
The zero code, that's the policy of the AIA. We'll defer to Ina. Okay. Okay, great.
Okay.
If there's none, thank you very much. Okay. So for our second panelist, we have a true public servant and representative of local government, here to talk about a subject that's very dear to his heart too, and the heart of his constituents. Please welcome Honorable Mayor of Chalan, Pago-Ordot, Jesse Gogi.
Give me a minute here. Let's see. Okay. Next slide. So I have several slides, about roughly a little over 20 slides. And this presentation has actually morphed over the course of about 10 years. It first started off as a presentation of regarding the planning of the construction of a multi-purpose center in the village of Chalan, Pago-Ordot. And then over time, as we reassessed and reevaluated the needs of the community, we realized, based on the way things were laid out, that what we really need to do, if we can see this multi-purpose center come to fruition, is actually integrate it into what we call now a mayor's complex. And so, next slide. As this idea of developing a mayor's complex, which started off with our multi-purpose center, morphed, we wanted to take a look at utilizing or taking advantage of today's technology and trying to build capacity and smart growth. If you really pay attention to the laws, the local laws, there's a law actually that says when you save energy in the cost or consumption of mayoral facilities, by integrating LED and maybe even solar or photovoltaic technology, whatever savings is realized is actual funds that can actually be used by that mayor's office for operational expenses, because they're no longer having to pay a large amount of monies towards energy consumption, and ergo would allow the mayors to utilize that. So of course, we went and started pursuing the use of LED fixtures. Next slide. For using smart growth. And all of this has been 12 years in the planning. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, this mayor's complex was started off with a multi-purpose center, and we realized that we needed to probably, in order to build this complex, move our office, which is 1.2 miles away from a majority of our facilities, which includes a community center, or more likely, or often referred to as a social hall, an outdoor basketball court, an outdoor tennis/volleyball court. It's a dual-use court. And then, of course, a standard-sized baseball field, not one of those small softball fields, but a legitimate, legal-sized, Little League-sized baseball field. And so we figured in order to develop this mayor's complex, we needed to move our existing mayor's office, which is over 50 years old, and bring it over to a site that's under our jurisdiction, under our management, to develop this mayor's complex. Next slide. So, next slide. So here you see at the top is a picture of the mayor's office. And for those of you who are familiar with Ordot Chalan Pago, the mayor's office is located in front of Agada Johnston Middle School, whereas the rest of our facilities is actually located in what we refer to as the Chalan Pago portion of Ordot Chalan Pago. And as you can see, that building in the background on the lower left photo is our community center, taken from our baseball field, and then from our bleachers around the base, surrounding the baseball field itself. So that baseball field is the size of Paseo Stadium. And so it's pretty substantial. Our property, next slide. Our property is roughly about 9.5 acres in size. And here's a picture of our community center and our investment over the last 12 years in trying to upgrade our infrastructure, improve our facilities utilizing smart growth. We've changed out the lighting fixtures. In fact, next slide. You can see that those upper louvers in the first slide weren't functional. In fact, we couldn't open them, and most of the window fixtures were actually sealed with plexiglass because they were damaged. However they were damaged, most of them were damaged, but you couldn't open them or close them, these fixtures. So what we went ahead and did is, in addition to trying to utilize more efficient lighting fixtures, we took the upper louvers and said they're of no use to us, so why don't we go ahead and replace them with reinforced glass block, reinforced glass box where the windows existed. What, of course, that allows is ambient light from outside to help light the inside of the community center, which reduces the overall demand on our energy resources. Next slide. And so this is ultimately the property that we're developing into this mayor's complex. As you can see on the top, that little rectangle, small rectangle figure, that's where we're planning on building our new mayor's office. And then that little L-shaped figure is where we're going to build our multi-purpose center complex. And basically what we're trying to do is take existing developed property and replace it with a newer facility, and bringing what is typically only used during good weather indoors. So that facility, next slide. Next slide. This is just a picture of how the mayor's office will be built, butted up against the community center. So in fact, we're going to actually be building 3 new walls, structural walls, and utilizing one of the walls for the mayor's office as the current structural wall for the community center. Next slide. Okay. Our multi-purpose center has all of these uses: training, cultural arts. In fact, at the bottom, you'll see that the footprint, or not even the footprint, I guess the functionality, would be a better term to use. The functionality of our multi-purpose center complex will be equivalent to or greater than the functionality of the Phoenix Center at Father Duenas Memorial School. So for those of you who've actually been to the Phoenix Center up at Father Duenas, they have a stage. We're actually incorporating a stage into the design so we can actually promote cultural arts. We'll have training facilities or training rooms so that we can do educational and other community type outreaches that typically agencies come to us for. In addition, next slide. Next slide. What we're planning on doing is leveraging this facility as an emergency shelter. It'll be a concrete structure design. We'll have a planned shelter management office via the mayor's office. There'll be a designated emergency registration area in the multi-purpose center itself. We'll use the court area or the open area of the court for shelter management and actually use some of the multi-purpose rooms also for sheltering, but for those people that need to be separated from the mass group of shelterees because they may have a medical condition or a very specific need that needs to be addressed and be away from the general population. Of course, the facility will have the restrooms and showers typical of a rec center like ours. And in fact, it'll even have limited laundry facilities. So if there's a long-term disaster where the family's there for weeks and maybe possibly even months, they'll be able to utilize, an area that we'll designate as a laundry facility area with, washers and dryers actually equipped in that area for use during sheltering. And actually, even as a means of allowing people who are having difficult time, utilizing the commercial facilities to come and do their laundry, provided the need is established within their families that they can't pay for it or they're unable to do it at home. And so in proximity to our community center, as you saw in the map that was laid out, over time, post-disaster declaration, when we go back to condition of readiness 4, we can actually utilize the multipurpose center strictly for sheltering and then use the community center as a social hall for feeding and emergency distributions, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll still have the mayor's office there to manage it all and make sure that the project or the support that we're providing during these emergencies are met with the assistance, of course, from Guam Homeland Security Civil Defense. And the idea of both the structure itself is bottom-up design. We know what we want, and we're going to build from the foundation up to ensure that we meet those needs, to include smart growth. As a matter of fact, what we're looking at doing with this new facility is separating, the mechanicals for the water system so that the water supply source to the toilets is on a separate line from to the water source for the sinks and showers, so that eventually when funding permits, we can actually collect stormwater and potentially even gray water and recycle it back into the facility and not have it impact the water supply into the showers and the sinks that need to be on municipal water. And so, hopefully the design will be complete by next month, and we'll break ground by next month, and within about 2.5 years, we'll actually see the center come to fruition. Next slide. This is just a floor plan of what we laid out more than 7 years ago with the volunteer efforts of Tato, actually. Tato is a resident of my village, and he's actually the one who helped us get this far in our project. Next slide. This is a rendering, again, that Tato developed of what it would look like once it's complete. Okay, next slide. So as you can see, this mayor's complex, and every step of the way, factoring the smart growth concepts, will be the development of a complex in a part of our community that's easily accessible, and hopefully over time will be walkable, to most of the populated areas in our community. It'll have a mayor's office, a community center, which is really our social hall, our existing social hall, It'll have the new multipurpose center. And the beauty of this site also is a baseball field, that during emergency declarations, we can not only do vertical delivery of goods and supplies, but we can do medevacs. You know, if there's something that needs to be extracted, the baseball field obviously is large enough to do helicopter medevacs. Next slide. So here again is this, the photo. You know, like I said, it's roughly 9.5 acres. And believe it or not, the measurements have been laid out. You know, the approach patterns and all that stuff has been kind of mapped out to ensure that what I've been advocating for over the last 12 years can actually be achieved. Next slide. So, you know, what this facility, this complex will provide is year-round activities, not only for our youth, but persons with special needs, our elderly, and activities that are not easily accessible to what we call LMI households, low to moderate income households. And for those of you who are familiar with low to moderate income communities, Chalan Pago is actually one. That means that we have over 50% of our community that is earning wages below the average income levels throughout Guam, established by the US Census. And partnerships are always a key component of any project I think the government plans. You know, we'll be partnering, of course, with my colleagues, our island mayors. We've actually established dialogue and partnerships with our 2 village schools. We have an elementary and a middle school in our village. We've discussed this with public health, civil defense and homeland security, Sanctuary and Manelu, which are NGOs, also home-based in our village. We hope to partner with the GNOC, the Guam National Olympic Committee, in promoting training programs and maybe even athletic competitions in our facility to really, you know, advocate and energize, you know, our youth and our people to be competitive, and more importantly, strive for that big, you know, win in the sky, that gold medal at the Olympics. Of course, we want to partner with our veterans. There's the Western Pacific Veterans Community Foundation, which we've had several conversations with, and have several members who are part of SAMI, the Society of the American Military Engineers. We want to partner with, of course, our own village coaches, and as well as our island-wide coaches, and the programs that the facilities can afford or offer residents, not just for Chalan Pago, but for at least the entire central region. So you're talking about Barragata, Manila, Chalan Pago, Sinohania, Hagatnya, and Aganya Heights, and Mongmototu Maiti were all considered part of the central region. And of course, you know, not to say the least, but probably the most important, because this is still a recreational facility or park site, you know, all of our sports association and clubs, and even our cultural and organizations that always are looking for a place to practice, a home to promote their arts or their talents. Next slide. So at the end of the day, this is what we hope it'll look like. You'll have the new mayor's office with that little pitched roof, and be attached to the the existing community center or social hall. And then in the background, you have the multi-purpose center. Next slide. That on both the new and old facilities, we want to use or to implement, you know, as I mentioned, photovoltaic technology, not just to power up the new facilities like the multi-purpose center, but on the existing roof of the community center social hall, you know, to power up the new mayor's office as well as the existing community center. And what in our design, we're actually ensuring that the electricals, you know, can actually allow us to tie in to not only generators, but to photovoltaic technology. And the same thing with our water systems, is to allow us to separate, you know, our toilets, our urinals, and all of these facilities, and ultimately be supplied by stormwater and potentially gray water over time. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the rooftop of this proposed multi-purpose center towards the front, you'll see some greenery. So we're actually incorporating an event area on the rooftop of this multi-purpose center to ensure that we maximize the use of every inch of this facility, not just indoors, but outdoors. The rooftop, the upper level rooftop for photovoltaic technology, and the lower rooftop, for actual use by the community. Next slide. So if you want to become a partner of smart growth, these are the things that you're trying to strive for. Mixed land use, take advantage of compact design, create a range of housing opportunities and choices. And for us, at least from my standpoint as a mayor, is create walkable neighborhoods, foster distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place, preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environment areas. That's why we're trying to overlay, or we're planning to overlay previously disturbed sites with this new construction that we're actually moving towards in this complex. And then strengthen and direct development towards existing communities. Not that we don't want to see growth in other areas and other parts of our community, but we definitely want to make sure that where development has already occurred, that we can strengthen those areas. And then provide a variety of transportation choices. That's kind of an obvious thing, and I think Dr. Kim kind of alluded to that this morning in his presentation. And of course, make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective. And I think, for those of you who have known me for the last 12 years as the mayor of Ordot, Chalan, Pago, I've always tried to emphasize this of being predictable, fair, and cost-effective. And finally, encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in developing this decision. This plan actually started with an idea, not mine, but the community's idea. And this is what we developed after 12 years of effort. Next slide. And so one of the things I wanted to point out, we're talking about stormwater lines. When I look at development, I look at sewer lines, because sewer lines is really the hinge pin right now as far as development is concerned on mixed land use. If you're close to a sewer line, you can build high density type structures. When you're away from sewer lines, not so much. So for me, in planning what's going on in our village, this map is a very important component of my planning and my planning decisions, is the existing sewer lines. Everything in yellow, there's a sewer line in it. The thicker lines, larger sewer lines, the smaller lines, probably no more than about a 4 to 6 inch sewer line serving those roads. But this, I think, is something that cannot be overlooked and understated. It's not only just how things flood, but based on the infrastructure, existing infrastructure, how things may potentially unfold as development occurs. Next slide. So thank you, Suzusmasi. I'm sure Tato has questions.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I think we have time for a few questions, if there are, from the audience.
Mic check, 1, 2, type. Mayor, thank you, and congratulations on all the great work that you're doing. It's wonderful to see your planning is very active, and I know that you'll be able to achieve the goals that you set out in your plan. My question is, how do you see this kind of be modeled in other jurisdictions, and do you have any advice to how to kind of replicate this and get community planning working in other jurisdictions?
Absolutely, absolutely. A long time ago, and for those of you who are probably in their 60s, maybe even in their 50s, a long time ago, the vision had always been there would be we would look at the island of Guam in regions, the northern region, the central region, and the southern region, with all three regions unique to one another. Obviously, we're trying to set a template for the central region and building a complex that's not managed by Department of Education or Public Health or, a lot of these other organizations that seek the assistance of the mayor's office, but a facility that's managed by a mayor's office so that when they come to a mayor, they basically have the resources to partner with these agencies. And if we make this work, and I believe we will, in fact, I know we will, that hopefully we can take this template and say any jurisdiction in the north or jurisdiction in the south that roughly has, and in fact, you don't need 9 acres. I think we can get away with about 7.5 acres based on my calculations. But if you have about 7.5 acres of land and you can build a complex that's managed by a mayor, you can expand the capacity and the capabilities of not only that village, but the entire region. Because sheltering, when sheltering occurs, is not just going to be the residents of Ordot, Chalan, Pago. As a matter of fact, typically when my residents are faced with a typhoon and they're told to shelter, I don't think I have more than about maybe 50 residents that actually seek shelter, at least in the last decade or 12 years that I've been a mayor. So at most 50, in fact, oftentimes it's actually in the 12, to 15 residents. I mean, families, maybe 2 or 3 families that actually go out and seek shelter. So this facility should be able to handle 200 plus shelterees. That's both in the common area with the court area, plus the multi-purpose rooms that would be used for those with special needs. And so, 200 is a lot, and I'm sure that they'll predominantly come from the outer lying villages in our region. That answer your question? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Okay,
That's all.
I guess that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
So finally, not least, of course, I'm sorry, thank you. We have the current president of AIA Marianas. She has shown leadership amid a most challenging time in the history of AIA on Guam, and has done so unlike any other president before her, and that is with grace and poise. Here to talk about AIA policies and green building infrastructure, please welcome Ina Visi.
Thank you for that, Tato. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, BSP, for the invitation to share, and thank everybody for your time and participation. As introduced, I'm Ina Visi. I'm the current president of AIA Marianas chapter, and I'm an associate at RIM Architects. This morning, we heard a lot of really good information to educate everybody about the floodplain, the risk, FEMA, and everything. So this morning, I want to share with you topics on design for a healthy community, smart and sustainable growth, and a resilient future for the island. I'll go through the slides for an overview, and then we can have a Q&A for a full panel discussion. In the essence of time, I'll stick to my script and just kind of go with the slides. Next, please. So the architect's call to protect health, safety, and welfare of the public extend past the building footprint. The pandemic has put a spotlight to built environments' impact to our health, well-being, and economic security. The rising sea levels and devastating natural disasters result in unacceptable losses of life and property. Resiliency is our island's first line of defense against disasters. To navigate our way forward, we harness the power of design to collaborate with everybody here and contribute to solutions for most significant needs of our time. The AIA's framework for design excellence represents AIA's defining principles of good design in the 21st century. The framework is inspiring sustainable, resilient, and inclusive design. The framework has 10 priorities. Design for integration. This priority is about a shared vision, comprehensive, holistic, and inclusive process for the success of projects. Design for equitable communities. This priority challenges the architect to provide human-scale, walkable communities, the use of alternative transportation, all of which facilitate social equity and community engagement. Designed for discovery, it provides us an opportunity for post-occupancy evaluation and engagement that fosters relationship. It facilitates knowledge sharing and feedback for the celebration of successful projects or moments of lessons learned. Designed for economy focuses on materials use, operational requirements, financing and incentives, and community links. This gives us an opportunity for the owner's requirements, operational and maintenance, and consideration of all those in our design. So our design work is not done, but throughout the lifetime of the facility and the projects that we use, we should consider those. Design for ecosystems. The design in consideration of landscaping, habitat, and biodiversity. The lighting selections for dark skies, bird-friendly designs, and site acoustic. We don't have a lot of birds here that fly into glass and skyscrapers, but nevertheless, we have to consider the local habitat, like, and our local, I'm sorry, I'm nervous too. Have to consider the environment and protect them. Design for water is designing for indoor water efficiency and outdoor water use reduction. Design strategies for processed water reuse, capture and reuse of gray water, stormwater use and management, and net zero water building. We're not quite a net zero water building, as Tato asked earlier. May I take this opportunity to answer the question? In the States, they're far more advanced and they have net zero everything, and they're implementing those and codifying them so that the measures would not be forgotten and addressed. But since we are kind of new to all these, we have to take baby steps and we have to do a step-by-step process. Like Brent mentioned earlier, we can't just jump from one because some of the measures might get lost in the transition. Design for resources, priority for safer material selection, material sourcing, embodied carbon considerations, and construction waste diversion planning. This is something that we're all familiar with, low VOCs, sourcing more local, regional, readily available, and picking materials, specifying for architects and materials that have low embodied carbon footprint, levels, and making sure that all the construction have proper waste management. Design for well-being, creative design of natural and artificial lighting, design for thermal comfort, and provide good indoor air quality, connecting to nature, acoustical considerations, and design for movement and exercise. Design with food security in mind. Like Mayor Gogi earlier said, some small gardens, especially in time of COVID, we had to make sure that all our needs are being met. Design for movement and exercise to make sure that our health and well-being are also addressed. And lastly, design for change. This is a design for flexibility and future adaptability, resilience and passive survivability, or assessing risk and mitigating them. So COVID has taught us a lot of things. Everybody had to adapt, give space for social distancing. We had to do makeshift partitions. So this design for change actually addresses how we are resilient, how we can get back to being normal, and how we can adapt to the changing challenges that we face, not just COVID, but in the future. So I will have more discussion on that later. So next slide. So the framework of design excellence challenges architects with a vision of what the profession strives to achieve. So right now, I would like to share with you green building infrastructure. Next, please. The AIA held its Capitol Hill Day at the annual Grassroots Leadership Conference on February 2021. The focus of this year's advocacy effort was green building infrastructure. It's important to come away from this with the recognition that infrastructure are not just roads and bridges. Infrastructure includes the public buildings that the roads and the bridges connect to make a community. Next slide. The Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, HR 3684, has passed the House and is now with the Senate. Next slide. There are 2,702 pages of the bill. As everybody tries to digest and figure out what it means for Guam, I'll share with you some key provisions that will improve the built environment. First is providing $3.5 billion in funding for the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program, which increases energy efficiency and reduces costs for low-income households. Next slide. Shown here are some typical weatherization measures. Next, please. And for more information, you can check out DOE's website or approach me later. I'll be here today and tomorrow. Next slide. So establishing grant for training of individuals to conduct energy audits and surveys of commercial and residential building, providing $250 million in funding, establish energy efficiency revolving loan fund capitalization grant program, again for residences and commercial buildings, and then developing training and assessment centers through institution of higher education and tribal colleges to train architects, engineers, and other professionals about energy efficient design and technologies, along with fostering additional research. So all these geared about education, public information, and making sure everybody knows what measures need to be done. Next slide. It's allocating $1 billion for Federal Emergency Management Agency's Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities BRIC program. We can find Mr. Leo later. I'm sure he knows a lot more about this. But for more information, you could check out FEMA's website. All 50 states and territories are all eligible for this. Next slide. Allocating $500 million of grants established from Safeguarding Tomorrow through Ongoing Risk Mitigation Act. It's STORM Act, kind of appropriate. We're always getting these. So this mitigates hazards to reduce risk from disasters. Some of the disasters are listed there. More information can be found on their website. And then next slide. Authorizing $500 million in competitive grants to support energy efficiency and renewable energy in schools. Establishing a $225 million competitive grant program within the DOE's Building Technologies Office to support cost-effective building code implementation. We advocate for robust building codes and policies that make our communities more resilient and sustainable. And we could talk to Brent about that for more information. And I believe that's the end of my slides. I thank you for your attention, and I turn you back to Tato if you have more questions so that the whole panel can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina. I think we're not over time, but I think we're late for lunch. So we'd like to open it for a few questions, if there are any in the audience, for any of our panelists. None? Oh. So we'd, before we go, to summarize the more salient points, I think the main takeaways include the importance of investment in communities, the move towards a zero carbon, resilient, and healthy environment, and the importance of implementation and the role of codes to ensure standardized implementation. That pretty much wraps up our presentation and our session for today. I thank you all for attending. One final announcement. Can we have the last slide? Keep going, please. One more. So if there's anything, any questions, additional questions you'd like, you can contact us. But we would like to request to please give your feedback. There's a QR code that will take you to our survey sheet. For anyone interested in getting a certificate of completion for this session, which will earn you 1 credit, please email us. And in behalf of Mayor, Brent, and Ina, thank you all.
Up next, realizing conservation districts within the Guam Comprehensive Development, facilitated by Edwin Regents of the Guam Coastal Management Program.
Start with a bit of an administrative setting. We draw our authorities from 5 GCA Chapter 1, Article 2, which is the Office of the Governor. As you know, the Governor's Office is one of the major driving force in terms of setting the leadership and direction for the island. So Article 1 is really the Governor's Office itself. And I think this really is a testament to what the purpose of planning is meant to be and can be, in which the statute puts a big emphasis in terms of placing statute right after the first article, which is the Governor's Office. So we are Article 2. I would mention that Bureau of Budget and Management is Article 3. So again, you see this emphasis that planning should be setting the stage for making decisions for our island. So here's a bit of our planning goals, and you can kind of read through them, but they really are these lofty statements of our charge to make Guam a vibrant and sustainable and a wonderful place to live. And so while these goals are certainly very, very important, I think realizing them is quite the challenge in terms of limited resources and just not being able to be and do everything that is required of us. But what this does set out, next slide. What this does set out, it really gives us an opportunity to focus on how to use our networking authority to work with other agencies in achieving those goals and objectives. And so when you look at our legislative intent, now we are mandated to produce the Guam 2050 Sustainability Plan. They lay out various strategies and principles, which really is in line with the Coastal Zone Management Act. And you can put those into 3 different buckets, which is healthy ecosystems, resilient communities, and vibrant economies. And so these type of priorities and these type of objectives and focus drives our effort in planning as we try to meet our mandate. Next slide. I just want to put on terms of responsibilities and authorities. We do have the ability to work across all agencies and to create that network and to ensure that there is harmony across all planning. And one of the things that you'll be seeing with the lineup of speakers that we have is that there are other agencies and other organizations that are involved in planning that we are folding into this process. So in addition to the Forest System Plan and the Seashore Reserve Plan, we're going to hear from the conservation districts, the soil and water conservation districts, and our Guam Preservation Trust. Next slide. This is a bit about coordination. So we have the authorities to coordinate within all agencies or instrumentalities, whether public or private, on Guam. Next slide. Here's a bit of our planning processes. So again, we do have statutory authority to adopt and to pass on these plans for adoption to our governor, in which there's a sequence that these plans can be adopted. Next slide. Here's a bit of our planning structure. I won't go in depth into this, but I just want to highlight that the conservation districts and the Seashore Reserve Plan are certainly ingrained in terms of our operations and how we see us carrying out the functions of our office. Next slide. So land planning on Guam has been quite the challenge. I've been doing this for about 6 years now, and I can say trying to address the comprehensive development plan is quite the task if if all those pieces are not in place. As you know, you may know, we don't have a specific appropriations for updating the comprehensive plan. So we try to work with different statutes and try to break that down a little bit into more manageable pieces. But even that it's been very, very difficult. I am very pleased to let you know that we did receive funding to complete the Guam Comprehensive Development Plan, which we will be starting on coming October. Okay, and so with that, I want to invite up Chelsea Willits, and she'll be giving an overview of the Seashore Reserve Plan. And again, this is a plan that is authorized by statute, and our hopes is that once we get this plan completed this year, it will be an element to our comprehensive development plan. So will you help me welcome Ms. Chelsea Willits?
Half a day, everyone, and yes, welcome to the Planner Symposium. My name is Chelsea, and I'm going to be giving a brief overview of the Guam Seashore Reserve Plan. Next slide, please. So I know all of you are eating right now, or some of you have gone to go get food, but who in this room enjoys going to the beach? Please raise your hand. Yeah, right? Isn't the beach such a wonderful place? You know, the seashore is a place where we can go to relax, to spend time with our families and friends, to have fiestas and barbecues. And, you know, some people even go fishing. And really, it's also a place that connects current generations to the past. Next slide, please. Ray. So although Guam's seashore has played an important role socially, economically, and historically for centuries, it wasn't really until 1973 that it was recognized as a place of exponential importance. And it was in 1973 that the 12th Guam legislature passed Public Law 12108, which established something called the Guam Seashore Reserve. Next slide, please. So later codified as 21 GCA Chapter 63, the Guam Territorial Seashore Protection Act of 1974 declares the Seashore Reserve as a distinct and valuable resource belonging to all the people of Guam, and that its paramount protection is of, its permanent protection is of paramount concern for current and future generations. In this law, it mandates that a comprehensive study be conducted of the area, and in accordance with the study, a plan be written for the reserve. Next slide, please. So some of you may be asking, well, where is this reserve on Guam? I've only heard of the marine preserves and ecological areas such as the Guam National Wildlife Refuge. Well, in the law, the boundary of the reserve extends from the mean high water line to the 10-fathom contour, which is the 60-foot depth in the water. And then it also extends on land to the 33-foot mark from the mean high water line or to the nearest public access point. And on this map here, this is a very brief map of the area, but we're working with a GIS specialist to create an interactive map for Google Earth that will have many features within the reserve. But as you can see on this map, the basic boundary is the coastline of Guam. And this excludes areas such as Cabras Island, which is under the jurisdiction of the port, and other areas that are under the jurisdiction of the port. And then also the federally managed areas, whether that be those owned by the Department of Defense or the National Park Service, etc. And within this boundary, it also includes all islands within the Guam's jurisdiction. So that could be Cocos Island, for example, is within the Seashore Reserve. Next slide, please. And this kind of brings me to why I'm here today. So as I said, my name is Chelsea Willits, and I'm the NOAA Coastal Management Fellow, serving as the project lead for the Guam Seashore Reserve Plan and its draft and its various components, really. And the NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship, if you're not familiar with this fellowship, is a highly selective process for both state and territorial coastal management programs. And it provides, and the selected applicants, and it provides on-the-job education and training opportunities for postgraduate students in coastal resource management. and provides projects assistance to state and territorial coastal management programs. Next slide, please. So as administrator for the Guam Coastal Management Program, Edwin Regis submitted an application proposal to update the Seashore Reserve draft plan that was written in the early 2000s with partner agencies back in 2019. And so his proposal was accepted for the 2020 round of Coastal Fellows. And so as a finalist for the NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship, I interviewed with Edwin, and as it turned out, I selected Guam as one of my choices, and Edwin selected me as one of his choices. So here I am, the current lead for the Guam Seashore Reserve Plan. Next slide, please. So I'm absolutely not working on this alone, and alongside the many partner agencies as well as organizations, of which some of are in this room, we have a core planning team that's working on this plan at the Guam Coastal Management Program. Audrey Meno is a planner one for the Guam Coastal Management Program, and she has been my sidekick throughout this entire project thus far. Edwin is, you guys know him, he's our administrator, and we couldn't be doing this without him as well. And there's me with hair. Yeah, next slide, please. So since August 2020, when I arrived here in Guam, we've been collaborating diligently on the Seashore Reserve Plan and have made exponential progress. Some of the highlights include, next slide, please. One, a legislative matrix, and this is a compilation of all of Guam's legal authorities relevant to the Seashore Reserve. And this has not only helped our project exponentially, but has also aided other GovGuam projects, such as the Department of Agriculture's Fisheries Management Plan. Next slide, please. Along with the legislative matrix, we've also conducted 2 stakeholder meetings with our key agency partners and organizations. And these were held to discuss progress made thus far on the plan, and as well as to incorporate input and feedback on the process thus far. Next slide, please. So another item we have drafted is the comprehensive study portion of the plan, which is mandated in the law. And this is basically a study of everything comprised in the reserve. So this could be information such as ecological characteristics of the Seashore Reserve, the land and marine usage within the reserve, as well as many maps of different features within the reserve. So thanks to everyone who has provided feedback thus far on this plan, and we could not come to where we are today without your help. So we continue to ask for comments and feedback on this portion of the plan thus far. And next slide. And last but not least, we've also already done some outreach. I was working with Steve Durking, our outreach coordinator, as well as PBS Guam, to create a 30-minute segment about the Seashore Reserve and its culture and history. And during this segment, I interviewed Dr. Michael Lujan Bavacqua, who is now the curator of the Guam Museum, and the chief program officer of the Guam Preservation Trust, Mr. Joe Kinata, who I believe will be speaking here soon. And so, yeah, that turned out to be a great segment. And now I'm working on a second segment, which will interview members of the community and kind of give an overview of the history of the seashore and the tomorrow relation to it and how it changed over time. And aside from this segment that we created with PBS Guam, I've also written some articles that have been published with the Guam Pacific Daily News, have garnered quite a bit of attention on Facebook, and have also submitted some surveys for people to answer and have gotten some great comments and feedback from that. So that's been great. Another thing that we've done is I've also been participating on Tyrone Titano's Data Hub podcast, talking about the Seashore Reserve Plan, and Audrey and I created a story map, which, if you're not familiar with that, is a program you can use on ArcGIS to create a story about whatever it is you want to create. And we created one about the Seashore Reserve and kind of provided a brief background and history of the reserve, as well as the indigenous connection to it and how it's changed to today. So next slide, please. So the next steps for the next year or so, which have already begun, next slide. Step one is to be working with agencies to develop policies which will be guidelines for future projects, rules, and regulations within the Seashore Reserve. We're aiming to schedule a meeting early to mid-September to discuss the law's objectives and goals and to define the vision of each element in the law. We're hoping for another one in October and maybe also in November before Thanksgiving. Next slide, please. So following the agency engagement, which I think we'll also kind of incorporate during that step one process, is the community outreach. And in this step, we want to have village forums where we talk to the different communities and how they can kind of relate to this plan and their ideas on the guidelines for future projects, rules, and regulations within the Seashore Reserve. Next slide, please. And lastly, our goal is to submit the Seashore Reserve Plan to the legislative branch by June 2022. Next slide. So I just want to say Suzuma to all of the partners and organizations we've been working with thus far. And this is just a glimpse that I had up here, but I just want to say thank you. We could not have gotten to where we are on this plan without your help and guidance and feedback. So we continue to ask for that, and we hope that you are able to continue to collaborate with us on this plan. And next slide. And I don't know if we're having questions or discussions, but I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Planner Symposium, and I will welcome up Christian Benitez to present next.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Right here.
Where?
Middle.
Oh, hi.
Yes. You know, this is great, and, you know, the 1974 Seashore Protection Act, contained in local law, has been challenged on many occasions, especially by, private landowners that own lands that abut the shoreline. And that in the Seashore Protection Act, it references the high water mean mark as based on a 1967 shoreline survey of where the high water mean mark was at in 1967. Over 50 years, you know that there's been significant erosion, along our shorelines, which in Ordot and Pago, in the Pago Bay area in particular, the erosion has actually come in about 20 feet. Actually, more than that, probably, actually more than that. So what equates to once being 20, 30 feet out as far as the high water mean mark is now a high water mean mark on private lands. And so you have private landowners saying, well, you can't take this now just because the high water mean mark has changed unless I justly compensated for the my land that now is underwater. How do you propose handling that through policy or legislation?
Well, I can't give you a 100% answer at this moment. But what I envision is that we'll work with the agencies to kind of develop guidelines, I guess, for something like that. Because obviously that is something of consideration with climate change and the continued erosion that's happening around the island. Yeah, I'd imagine we'd have to talk amongst ourselves and then also bring that to the community and get their ideas and perspectives and then kind of bridge the gap and kind of see what we can do moving forward in terms of that.
Yeah, but in the interim, what you're having now is landowners saying, well, even though the water is up to my property line, I'm going to build up to the water line, and basically block off seashore access, because technically the high water mark, based on the current law, is out there 20, 30 feet. So you can't tell me I can't build up to this point because, based on the way the law reads, that high water mark is out there, even though legitimately it's up to where I build.
Right. I don't recall anything in the law regarding the 1967 coastal study and that relevance to the mean high water line. But I'd imagine we'd work with the mean high water line that has been established within the past 3 to 5 years.
I'm telling you now, in a particular case that had the AG's office and Public Works, the Seashore Commission,
It's
that
actually
challenged somebody that built in my village up to and into the water actually at low tide. We challenged that structure that was touching the water at high water, at the high water mark. And to date, it hasn't been resolved because that legal issue of, I'm building on my land, and that this law was based on the 1967 high water mean mark, and it hasn't been updated. The law hasn't been updated to reflect, the current location of the high water mean mark based on erosion. I have every right to build up to my property's edge, or where I'm building on my property, because, technically, as the law is written, and he's a lawyer, as the way the law is written is a high water mean mark that applies to this particular law is out there 30 feet in the water. And so, to date, nothing has been done to get that structure removed from the shoreline.
Yeah. Well, also to mirror that, it's been 47 years now, and finally this plan is getting written and hopefully be submitted to the legislation. Now, there was a draft written previously, and I won't exclude that. However, it was never submitted to the legislative branch. And so when it comes to the mean high water line, I imagine that would be something that have to be changed in the law, or another law to be written to replace that. I'm not sure exactly how that would look.
Everyone might.
Sure.
Mayor, thanks for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and tag team with Chelsea in terms of answering your questions. I think what is going to happen is that this Territorial Seashore Reserve Plan will then set the policies and strategies in place, but more importantly, it allows for the framework to develop those rules and regulations.
Exactly.
So in those rules and regulations, we can look at how to address legal but non-conforming, or any other development feature that would exist in the Seashore Reserve Plan. So I think I'll stop there, but we can have a conversation on, throughout the conference on that. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, sounds good. I'd like to welcome up Christian Benitez, please.
Half a day, everyone. My name is Christian Benitez, and I'm a planner with the Bureau of Statistics and Plans under the Guam Coastal Management Program. And I've been tasked to assist in the development of the Guam Forest System Plan. So I've been collaborating with Department of Agriculture and Forestry and everyone who's been pulled in the development of the Guam Forest System Plan. So I'm just going to go ahead and just start with providing the background on the Guam Forest System. So on November 22nd, 2011, Bill number 382-31 was introduced by Senator Aline Yamashita, which called for an act relative to establishing the Guam Forest System. The intent of the bill was to establish the Guam Forest System, which would assist the Guam Department of Agriculture in its mission by providing a plan to bring the Guam Department of Agriculture and all partners and stakeholders to the table to create an inventory of land that would help in coordinating efforts to leverage these resources and determine the best compatible uses within the Guam Forest System. The bill was then passed on January 20, 2012, and signed into law as the Guam Forest Legacy Act of 2011. So the Forest Legacy Act provides 12 required elements. Next slide, please. So 12 required elements to guide the development of the Guam Forest System Plan. And I just want to quickly go over these elements as provided by the public law. First is an inventory of land to include lot number, size, and location for proposed potential use in the system. The next element is a comprehensive and concise definition of the public interest in the system. Proposals for maintenance and enhancement of the overall quality of the system environment. Stipulations for public access for recreational, educational use. Proposals for land use to include elements of, but not limited to, education, scientific research, training activities, recreation, conservation, and preservation. Proposals for collaborations with entities within the government of Guam and non-government organizations for planning, enhancement, and sustainability of the system. List of allowable activities within the system and penalties for violations. recommendations for the sustainability of the system, including the extent to which development may be allowed. Proposals for permits and fees shall be dedicated to the operations and maintenance of the system. Procedures and protocols for discovery or presence of historic artifacts on the government of Guam lands included in the Guam Forest System. Procedures and protocols for identifying government or privately owned land for inclusion in the system in accordance to public law. Procedures and protocols which shall include a component for public review for leasing of land to be included in the system to entities for purposes in accordance with public law. So we're currently updating the narrative of the plan to strengthen the elements that need more work. And where we're having the most challenges now is with the land inventory, which I will talk about next. So currently we have a list of locations, and these are government of Guam lands identified as natural preserves and conservation reserves pursuant to public law, and other public lands deemed important for cultural, ecological, and public use reasons. So what we need to work on now with the land inventory is determining who currently has administration or who currently has administrative jurisdiction for each of these specific lots in order for the collaboration within agencies to happen. Next slide, please. So now that I've provided some background information on where we are with the plan, I want to talk about the importance of establishing the Guam Forest System. So the areas of land that will be included in the Guam Forest System are multi-use areas with a range of public use benefits. Different areas within the system will have competing uses, including extractive use, low-impact recreation such as hiking, hunting, or camping, and more environmentally challenging uses such as off-road driving trails. So the Guam Forest System will establish a plan to balance uses with the public interest in long-term protection of these sites and the services they provide. The Guam Forest System will sustainably manage these areas to facilitate safe recreational use, support educational and traditional use, and strengthen the economy through direct means such as provision of commercially viable timber through indirect benefits, including water quality protection, flood abatement, erosion control, and ecotourism opportunities. The forest system provides other less quantifiable benefits, including improvements to human health and well-being associated with access to the forest and undeveloped areas. I just want to quickly talk about some goals and objectives currently identified under the forest system plan. Next slide. So one of the goals identified is to manage watersheds to protect and improve water quality of surface water, groundwater, and nearshore marine habitats. Another goal identified in the plan is to maintain and enhance biological integrity of native ecosystems. Another goal is the forest system plan is to support public access to the Guam Forest System. And of course, the plan provides specific objectives and activities that support this goal. And lastly, strengthen the economy by sustainable use of the forest products and protection of key forest ecosystem services, such as flood abatement, erosion control, carbon fixation, and ecotourism. Next slide. Now, just to wrap up my talk, covering some items for moving the Guam Forest System plan forward, we're planning a mini summit next month to get all the key individuals and subject matter experts in the room to get their input in addressing the elements of the plan that require that collaborative effort, such as the land inventory and other required elements of the plan that need strengthening. So we hope to complete the land inventory and finalize the draft plan to submit to the governor and transmit it to the legislature for approval, along with the promulgation of rules and regulations, at least within the legislative calendar. Then we could begin to continue developing the site-specific management plans for each of the areas identified under the inventory. So we'll definitely need a lot of support in the future when the plan is up for public review and when it's heard at the legislature. So I hope everyone is looking forward to the further development of the plan, and we appreciate all the collaboration and support in this effort. That's all I have. Thank you. So I'm just going to call up the next speaker, Joe Kanata.
Happy day, everybody. I gotta wake you up. The food's putting you guys to sleep. And I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be with, I think, maybe about 75% of the folks here I've worked with. Really great planners here, architects, engineers, you know, everybody here. This is really great. My presentation today, I only have 3 slides, so you don't have to worry. I'll be up here for less than 5 minutes. Only because I want to let you know good things are happening. The Guam Preservation Trust, of which I'm representing, I have my chairman on that side, so he's really watching carefully what I'm going to say. If you meet him, I'd like to acknowledge him, Michael McKeel. Michael? Tell him I need a raise. So I'm here to talk about Atantano, the Heritage Preserve. It's really a great place. Where is Atantano, by the way? And I know Chelsea came up here and said, how many of you like to go to the beach? Well, I'm going to tell you, how many of you like to go inland? All right, into the jungle. You get to see lots of rare plants and rare species, and you get to go through the river, and it's a really great place. But I have to say that I need to plug in the company that made it possible for us to acquire this property. The Atantano property is a 74 hectares, not acres, but hectares. A pristine land, a river runs through it, the Atantano River. It has many habitats. For those of you who are conservationists, this is like a heaven for them. For cultural resource managers, again, we have about good 18 latte sets. There's a settlement that once was there. So it is a great place. Shell company, before they left, they needed to divest their assets, and one of the biggest assets was this property. And so they went searching for the right people, the right organization to donate the property to. So we are very grateful to Shell company for giving us this legacy. I call it a legacy because the Guam Preservation Trust, really the word preservation, is going to preserve this area for our future. Just like a lot of the other properties that we have acquired or have been donated to the Guam Preservation Trust. But at Atantano, we are developing a master plan. Next slide. And we're developing a master plan to address 3 I call it mission, some people call it vision, some people call it goals, but 3 important aspects of a heritage preserve. And the three-prong aspect is research development, and that is for people like a lot of you in the room, the university, people that need to do some research on plants and animals and all of that stuff, people in the cultural resource management field that would like to also do some field work. And the results of our research and development brings us to education and outreach, and how can we educate our community about Atantano. And in order for us to have this sustainable, to make sure it works, then we kick in our heritage enterprise. So everything that happens on research and development, that happens on education and outreach, is going to be taken in by the heritage enterprise and create products for that, so that in turn it funds the Atantano Heritage Preserve. So we decided to embark into a master plan for the development of Atantano. Next slide. And this holistic approach, and I know a lot of people earlier was talking about holistic approach to planning. This is a holistic approach to healthy heritage planning. We have just confirmed our partnership with the Nature Conservancy, and they will be our technical person to develop this heritage master plan using the healthy country concept that is a product of the conservation coaches. We would like to get your input. We would like to get your partnership into the development of the master plan and again, the development of the heritage preserve. And that's all I have for you today. There's a lot of things happening at the Guam Preservation Trust, and this is just one really good thing. So I have some brochures up here. I will leave it on the table right in the front if you wish to pick something up that you want to be able to be part of. And I wish you have a good lunch and I enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. And our next and last speaker is Erica. And come on up.
All right, buenas and hafaday Todung Hamzu, honorable guests and esteemed colleagues. My name is Erica Pangilinan, program affiliate with the Guam Soil and Water Conservation Districts. Here with me are my directors in the audience, representing on behalf of the Northern and Southern District. We have Chairman Michael Luggett, and we have Chairwoman Hope Cristobal from the Northern District. And we also have District Director Katrina Regis. We are thrilled to have been invited to be a part of the program. Kudos on another year of the annual Planners Symposium, and Siduas Maasi for having us. So the topic of this session, realizing the conservation districts, is so perfect because I'll be talking about another type of conservation district, the soil and water conservation districts, or the Guam SWCDs. The intention of my talk today is to share the story of the soil water conservation districts, both nationally and locally, highlighting who we are, what we do, and how we are moving forward with the Guam Long Range Plan for Soil and Water Conservation. Our story is really unique because the SWCD's legacy stems all the way back to the 1930s, beginning with the phenomenon known as the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl was a name given to the Southern Plains region of the United States, which suffered severe dust storms during the dry period. High winds and choking dust would sweep the region from Texas to Nebraska, and people and livestock were killed, and crops failed across the entire region. It is said that the severity of the Dust Bowl was caused by the increase of intensive agriculture. Poor farming economics and farming practices affected the ecology of the land, which resulted in poor soil and water, and lands were no longer farmable. This raised a lot of concern. So on April 27, 1935, Congress passed a law in which recognized that the wastage of soil and moisture resources on farm, grazing, and forest lands is a menace to our national welfare, and therefore established the Soil Conservation Service as a permanent agency within the USDA to work in close partnership with farmers and ranchers, local and state governments, and other agencies to maintain healthy and productive working lands. Today, that agency is known as the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. But that was not enough to get the buy-in of the farmers to engage in conservation. So President Franklin D. Roosevelt recommended the Soil Conservation Act. To engage, he recommended this act that would be signed into law by all state governors as a way to encourage farmers and locals to be better stewards of the land. The first Soil and Water Conservation District was created in 1937, and by 1948, all 48 states passed the Districts Enabling Act. And then something great happened. In 1984, the late Governor Ricardo J. Bordallo signed the executive order establishing the Guam Soil and Water Conservation Districts. The executive order was connected to the Green Revolution, which prioritized the development of Guam's agriculture. And I just want to highlight this picture. It was taken in the late 80s, and it was at a soil and water conservation demonstration site. And I just think it's so cool. Look at those kids from Guam engaging in restoration practices and planting trees in the southern part of Guam. So back then, there were boots on the ground. Next slide. So later on, around 2008, a Northern and Southern Soil and Water Conservation District was revamped to work in partnership with the University of Guam and in cooperation with all government entities to promote the wise use of soil and water resources, control and prevent soil erosion and flooding, and to improve agricultural water management. Each district is operated by a board of 5 directors who are elected to serve by the registered bona fide farmers and agriculture landowners or leasees as appropriately registered with Department of Ag and/or Department of Land Management. And the most unique thing about our districts on Guam is that we have 2. So compared to the mainland, districts usually, their boundaries can range from 1,000 miles to a whole state. But here, because of our delicate and diverse nature of our island, we are so lucky to have 2 districts that provide special focus on each ends of the island. And although we may be separated by the Pago-Ordot fault line, distinguishing what is northern and what is southern, the districts work together to push the mission of conservation forward through efforts including facilitation of workshops for farmers promoting conservation best management practices, coordination of the annual Soil and Water Educators Symposium, resulting in hundreds of teachers certified in learning about natural resource conservation and bringing it into the classrooms for our children. Partnering with USDA APHIS Wildlife Services to remove feral swine that continue to be a nuisance to our farmlands, cultural resources, and our human safety. Close to 2,000 feral swine have been removed since the partnership. And we've helped boost the number of farmers applying into the USDA NRCS Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which helps farmers address their resource concerns and implement effective conservation practices. And even through all of these efforts, we've been able to make a great impact with our small budget and limited resources. And really, the true success of our efforts is attributed to the directors who advocate and pour their hearts out into this important work, which brings us to our latest accomplishment. Last year, the districts received its first ever federal grant award through a competitive grant from NRCS. The project was initially geared towards swine management, but was later expanded to address Guam's priority resource concerns. A working group of environmental agency representatives, farmers, and ranchers have identified these priority resource concerns. These include soil quality. Soil quality refers to the soil's ability to carry out its function. Long-term protection of land. Oh, next slide. The idea of long-term protection of land consists of efforts to preserve the natural state of land, keeping it free from development. Pest pressure. Pressure from pests refers to the damage caused by invasive plant, animal, and aquatic species. Wind and water erosion. When wind and water erosion occurs, it has the capability to change the shape of the land, also cause sediment runoff, and eventually suffocating our coral reefs. And source water depletion. Source water depletion occurs when source water is used at a faster rate than it can be recharged. With these priority resource concerns, the districts, with the help of the University of Guam Cooperative Extension and Outreach, developed the long-range plan framework, identifying the measurable goals, objectives, and deliverables for each priority area. The local working group plans to convene a meeting in September of next month, where we will present the plan in detail and further develop a targeted conservation proposal, or TCP, for FY22. The TCP will provide direction to NRCS in where they can commit their federal dollars to help support and move the needle in our conservation efforts. The TCP will also be an opportunity for our partners to collaborate for a much greater impact. In closing, this Guam Long Range Plan is a first for the districts, and it will serve as our roadmap for the next 5 years to help with our efforts in conserving Guam's precious natural resources. And this is also for public and private lands. And we can confidently say that this plan is very much measurable and achievable. And also, this plan is very timely, especially as Guam is moving into a more sustainable island by aligning with the UN 17 Sustainable Goals. We look forward to contributing to that cause, which is much greater than all of us. So I just want to end and say I'm happy that the GLRP, the Guam Long Range Plan, made it just in time to the planning party. So Saina Ma'asi, and thank you for your time, and feel free to contact us. Here's our net. The next slide. This is Ma'asi. Viva!
Thank you very much, Erica. So, were we having fun? I'll tell you, I mean, it's been a while since I was at the Bureau of Planning, but this is really a lot of information, and it's going to be a continuing education credit for a lot of folks here too. So, so far, great conference.